Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Girls Are Racing. I'm Miranda, and this is my show where I review all things women in motorsport, but especially F1 Academy, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the Montreal, Canada GP weekend. It was round 4, so we're at about the halfway mark for the series this year. This video is actually just going to be about race 1, which was the cancelled race from the Miami weekend. The reason I've decided to do that is this weekend was really action-packed. There was a lot of things happening on the track and a lot of things happening off the track. And so I kind of wanted to cover it all, but I felt like a video that touched on all 3 races would be just way too long. These videos are already so long, I know I talk for forever, so I'm just trying to keep this one a bit shorter and just focus on race 1. And in my opinion, just as a fan and a viewer, this was my favorite race that has happened this year so far. It was full of action, it had so much excitement, and yeah, couldn't look away, and there was so much going on. And just as a fan, I just had the best time watching it. I know the commentary thought that maybe race 2 was one of the better ones, and it was really, really good, which I'll touch on in another video. But race 1 for me was my favorite, and it's been my favorite of the series so far. So this was the makeup race for Miami, which didn't end up happening because it got rained out. So we started the weekend with this race 1, right? It was a full points race, 17 laps, and we had the starting grid from Miami that didn't get to race there. So Chloe Chambers started on pole. I'll put the starting grid up on the screen. But basically, Ava Dobson, who was the wild card for Miami, she didn't get to race in this race because it obviously got rained out. But it meant that the wild card for this round, Matilda Pats, she got to race in 3 races. So it's unfortunate for Ava Dobson, but it's a really cool opportunity for Matilda to get to race 3 times in the series on one weekend. She said it was the furthest she's ever been from home. So I thought that this was a really cool opportunity for her to get some experience and some track time. But the reason I bring up the wild card so early is because she didn't qualify, Ava Dobson did. So on that starting lineup, she essentially had to slot in at the bottom in P18. And I guess before we get into kind of the play-by-play of the race, I thought it was worth mentioning that I thought she did really well. She had some accidents, and I don't think she finished 2 of the races. She definitely had her issues this weekend, but I thought overall she did really, really well, showed some really good fighting spirit, and I think it was really impressive, and it certainly helped make race 1 really interesting. I think it's worth mentioning that she made it into the top 15 within 2 or 3 laps when she had started in P18. We haven't seen that kind of racing from a wild card just yet, I don't think. I thought Ava was doing a really, really good job, but Matilda also has been bringing something that we haven't quite seen from the wild cards this season yet. So I was really, really impressed with how she got off to her start on the first race. So I guess if we want to start with the main action of the race, although there was so much action in this race, the Chambers Palmovsky sort of contact and the spin, it was quite something. I think Alicia was battling really, really hard. She wants to win the race. She keeps getting sort of pipped to pole by Chloe Chambers, her teammate, her Campos teammate. And I think that she was really, really fighting very hard for that win. She obviously got the first win of the season in Shanghai, but I think she wants another one, which, fair enough. But that battling, she just locked up, pushed it a bit too hard. And yeah, the spin happened, and it was quite dramatic because obviously they were P1 and P2, and Dorian completely capitalized off of that. And as we all know, she won the race. It was excellent. I am a Dorian for F1 Academy Champion 2025 supporter. So therefore, I was quite happy with the outcome, but obviously it's quite unfortunate for Chloe and Alicia that happened, but it's just the byproduct of hard racing. It's just an accident and it happens. And I feel like before we keep going, I'll put up on the screen that Alicia apologized publicly. I'm sure she did privately as well, but she apologized publicly on Instagram, and Chloe responded that they're all good. It happens. It's just racing. It's unfortunate, but these things happen and they move on and they go stronger for the rest of the races. So I thought it was a really mature response from them. They do have media obligations, but they don't have the intense media of F1. So they had a chance to kind of collect their thoughts and publicly put out a statement about what happened. And I thought that was just, a really good, mature response from the 2 of them. Eventually, Chloe Chambers did have to pit because she managed to make it out of that accident slightly unscathed, not really, but eventually her front wing ended up like underneath her car and she definitely had to pit. But her and Alicia both made up several places from the bad positions they ended up in due to that contact. Chloe even ended up with points, and Alicia obviously got a penalty which took her out of the points, but she ended, I think, in P10 within the points before that penalty. So I thought that was just really impressive from them, that they managed to sort of turn it around in the way that they did despite the spin and having to pit. And it shows what good racers they are, even when they face these sort of challenges. I think it's also worth mentioning the issues that happened for Maya Berg. She was almost kind of, it seemed like, treating this race as a bit of a test race. And not that she wanted to, not at all, but something was going terribly wrong in her car. And no one could work it out. She also put something on Instagram about how they'd spent hours trying to work it out and they just couldn't. And I find that so bewildering as someone who knows very little about like the technicalities of motorsport. I'm just so confused because I'm still confused, I should say, because it's a spec series, so all the cars are the same, and I don't I don't understand why they couldn't figure it out. But I suppose that just shows how technical things can get and the issues that arise. But yeah, I don't really know what to say about that. It was just really unfortunate for her that that happened. She essentially, the commentators said when she got off like her starting mark that the car didn't like rev properly. It didn't like sound like how it should. And so I think that was probably the first indication that this wasn't going to go particularly well for her, especially when she got overtaken. And we know Maya Berg doesn't get overtaken without a fight. So that was like sort of the first indication that something was still continuing on to be an issue, because we had known there was an issue in free practice and in qualifying for the weekend, which I'll get into in the other video, but she qualified really low. And then for this race from Miami, she had also not qualified particularly well because of the rain in the Miami qualifying. But then she just got massively overtaken at the start. And what ended up happening in her race, she did end up DNFing. But what happened in her race was she basically would do a lap. They would try and fix something in the pits, and then she'd do another lap, and they'd try and fix something, or she'd do a couple laps. And I think it was essentially just became a race of data collection, because they just knew she wasn't going to get any points because the car just was missing some sort of oomph or some sort of power. Something was just going really, really wrong. They were attempting to fix it so that she could at least recover the next two races of the weekend and hopefully protect her championship lead, which didn't happen. But nonetheless, I believe at some point in some of the later laps, she was 3 or 4 laps down from the race leaders. And it was because of this constant pitting and testing different things, trying to change different things. It was really sort of unfortunate thing to happen to the championship leader because it's entirely out of her control. But I suppose this is just how things go in motorsport. Sometimes the cars just have failures or have issues, and it just is what it is. But it's definitely super unfortunate that it was just nothing in her control at all. She couldn't even kind of fight Doriane for the points. And yeah, she was a couple laps down, but she did just end up DNFing because the car was just something deeply wrong. And I think they did manage to have it fixed by the end of the weekend, but losing an opportunity in a full points race where she was already kind of starting on the back foot because of qualifying, I think that was just, it just really sucked. It was just kind of unfair, but what can you do? Like, it was just out of her control. But as I said, as a Doriane Pan fan, I'm quite happy that she got P1 and she was able to sort of overtake Maya on the standings by 24 points by the end of just race 1. And it was really cool because I've been rooting for her this whole time. I felt that she was going to overtake her in the standings. Now she's the hunted, not the hunter. But yeah, just really, really excited for her, for how she was able to capitalize on the mistakes of Alicia and Chloe and also get out of any issues unscathed and kind of take that lead. So if we just go back to that sort of overtake, Chambers did still put up a really good fight against Doriane even after the incident with Alicia, but then her car troubles kind of just became a bit too much to ignore, and she did have to give up that fight to Doriane. She eventually got showed a black and orange flag, which I wasn't expecting to see that after seeing it in Miami, but then we saw it a third time, but I'll get to that in a bit. She was given a black and orange flag for that front wing under sort of the front tires, and she did go in for that, but that kind of clearly gave Doriane the lead, whereas they were having a really good battle in lap 3. Alba Larson was also having a really good race. She also hadn't qualified too well in Miami, but she ended up in, I think, P5 or P6. It was really, really incredible from her. Her GPS or whatever it is, her tracker, it was going crazy because the timing tower kept kind of shooting her up and then shooting her down to like P15, and you never quite knew where she was, if she was having a sudden retirement or something. But she did really, really well in this race to make up those points and get up quite high. And I think she's still showing a whole heap of promise. And she's very fast, a clean, hard racer, but very aggressive. And she's not afraid to get stuck in with the girls who are vastly more experienced than her. And I think it's such an incredible quality of hers. And I keep talking about it, but I can't wait to see her to just keep going. I am wondering where she'll end up in this year's standings, because she's showing so much quality despite not having that much experience. So as she gets that experience, who knows where she could end up in the standings and then in future years too. So Alicia had spun, but she didn't need to go into the pits, but she was on the back foot. However, by lap 6, she was up into P10. So that was really kind of incredible racing from her. And then she was behind Chloe Chong. And Chloe Chong was putting up an excellent fight. In fact, in my personal opinion, it's the best racing we've seen from her in the series this year. It was quite incredible to see her keep Alicia Palmowski behind, who we know is so vastly talented, and Chloe Chong has been struggling quite a bit this year already. But their battle, according to the commentator, was losing them 1.5 seconds a lap per lap, and they were fighting for a number of laps. And I thought it was so incredible from Chloe Chong to see her put her elbows out and defend her position like that, whereas she hasn't been super competitive in the previous races that we've seen, especially against an opponent quite like Alicia. It really was Chloe Chong's best driving yet, and so it was really disappointing the way the race ended for her, completely through no fault of her own. We'll get to that in a bit, but for now, the racing between the two of them was so excellent, but they were losing all this time, right? And that brought the wildcard Matilda back into play, and she was in P11 sort of watching them, biding her time, and they were slowing down so much that she was able to get involved. And it was really incredible. It became sort of like she was like the Jaws shark behind the two of them, and the music starts playing because she's coming more into the battle and she's more able to perhaps take an opportunity out of the fact that the two are fighting each other. At least that's how it seemed in the moment to me. So Alicia did finally pull ahead into P9, I believe it was. It was incredible battling, but eventually she just kind of got the better of Chloe Chong, who put up a very, very valiant effort. But around this time is actually when we had the first proper crash safety car of the race. When Alicia spun, it was sort of, I believe it was yellow flagged, but it was green flagged very quickly because there was no sort of tangible issue and Alicia was able to get going very quickly. But this was the first proper yellow flag and then eventual safety car. Matilda Pats, she kind of hit a curb and she went straight into the wall of champions, which aptly named, I suppose. And her car, I guess I'll throw up a picture, but it was mangled. Like, I couldn't, obviously from the screen, it doesn't even look like they're going that fast, but the car was just kind of wrecked all on that right side. And I really think it put into perspective in that moment just how sort of actually fast-paced this is and how fast-paced F1 Academy is, even if I know people on the internet like to complain that it's not that fast. The damage on her car was really substantial, and that did put her out of the race, which was really unfortunate because, as I said, she had kind of come across Chloe Chong and Alicia battling really well, and it looked like she was putting herself in a position to be able to take advantage of that. And so it was just such an unfortunate way for her race to end. But I thought she had improved so much and she was showing so much promise and potential, and she was performing really, really well for a wild card. So for the rest of the weekend, I was still really looking forward to seeing what she could do. And I didn't think it was like the end of the world or such a bad thing that she had crashed, because in my mind, she was already showing so much talent that it was more like, oh, these things happen. Let's go again for the next races. And obviously she's just a wild card for Canada, but I'm really looking forward to seeing what she does in motorsports outside of F1 Academy. And in the next years, maybe she'll have a seat. Who knows? So Matilda had been doing really well, but obviously that incident just completely ruled her out of the race. It was a whole heap of damage, but the safety car that it brought out had the effect of completely obliterating Dorian's lead. It actually completely obliterated any of the gaps between the races in the top 10. And below that as well, for that matter, which I guess that is the effect of safety cars. But anyway, what had happened was there was quite a big gap between Alicia Palmowski and Tina Hausman in around that P7 to P9 territory. That completely just sort of evaporated, which meant that when we had the restart, all the girls were bunched up and it became suddenly a lot more competitive than it already had been. And it already was quite competitive, but this just intensified it even further. It had been 6 seconds between Tina Hausman and Alicia Palmovsky, and it was just gone. And Dorian's lead, she was leading Ella Lloyd, who was in P2, who had also taken advantage of the kind of problems between the Campos teammates ahead of her. She'd come into P2 quite nicely after, I believe, a nice overtake as well on Emma Felbermeyer. And suddenly the hunt was on, the game was on, everything was in play now. And the restart was pretty intense. All the cars, as I said, they were bunched up, and it was honestly a mistake waiting to happen around one of those chicanes. And eventually, Rafaela Ferreira did go off at one of the turns. It's quite an infamous turn for people going off into the grass, I believe. But she also re-entered the track quite unsafely, and she went straight into Chloe Chong, and that's where her DNF came from. And as I said, it was so unfortunate and so undeserved, because she was having a great race. She was keeping her car out of trouble. She was just fighting so well. And for that to happen to her was just so undeserved. Like, these things happen in racing, but it was just really undeserved. And it was so unfortunate because I was really looking forward to seeing what she could do, given how well she'd been fighting this race already. And to be honest, watching Ferreira rejoin the track, it just seemed like an accident waiting to happen, because she was carrying so much speed and the corner was just so tight. And especially the way all the cars were bunched up, I really felt like that was an accident waiting to happen, and quite a bit more caution should have been applied. However, she also had to retire, Rafaela, for what happened. She just retired on the side of the road later on. And I think she did carry a grid penalty into the next race because of that. I'll correct myself on screen if I'm wrong, but I believe she did carry a grid penalty. And to be honest, it's quite deserved, because it was an unsafe rejoining on the track, and it completely put Chloe Chong out of contention. And it also really hindered her in the second race, which she started from pole, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, just so undeserved and so unfortunate. So this race did end under safety car, and that was also partially, it was redeployed because there was another bit of contact between Courtney Crone and Joanne Seconte. And this was, again, because the cars were quite bunched up because of the previous safety cars, that around some of those tricky turns and the girls fighting for the points, there was just accidents waiting to happen. These cars don't have any DRS, so any overtakes really have to be done on pure skill, pure strategy, these types of things. And so sometimes, especially for the more inexperienced drivers, some issues can arise, especially when they're bunched up after a safety car. So I believe what happened was Joanne locked up and kind of hit Courtney Crone, and this caused Courtney Crone to spin. And this is where the second black and orange flag actually came up, because Joanne was black and orange flagged back into the pits just at the end of the race. And I've never seen two of those flags in the same race. I had never, as I said in my video, I had never seen one before Miami. But anyway, she had to kind of go back in because clearly whatever contact happened there was just too much for her to stay out. Even just for one lap, it seemed they wanted her back in to the pits to fix it. So yeah, they called her back into the pits, even on the last lap. I suppose just that's how things go, but it meant that there was no overtaking on that last lap because it finished under safety car. But that meant that we had Dorian P1, Ella Lloyd P2, and Emma Felbermeyer P3. I don't think anyone really understands how excited I was for Emma Felbermeyer to be up on that podium and in the celebrations, because she had just had so much bad luck, especially in Miami, and in Saudi a little bit of bad luck too, but also a bit of inexperience. And I was so excited for this to be sort of her turning point, her coming of age in F1 Academy, if you will, for this year. I was so excited. I was like, this is what she needed. She didn't need a pole position start. She just needed a P4, a P5, and to capitalize and to stick her elbows out. And I really felt like she did. Obviously, Ella Lloyd got the better of her getting into P2, but she was still up on the podium. I thought it was an incredible result for her, only for me to find out much later on that she had been disqualified because of, I believe her car was underway. It was a technical infringement, and that was just so upsetting because I'd just been rooting for her so much, and she was flying, and yeah, that was so frustrating. Yeah, she'd been flying, so that was just really upsetting to find out about afterwards. But the truth is, watching her still on the podium, that was still very exciting. I was very happy for her in the moment before we knew that she was going to be disqualified, obviously. But Ella Lloyd got a great start to the weekend, which would continue to carry on into the rest of the races, which I'll talk about later. But Dorian in P1, excellent race, completely capitalized off of others' hard racing and others' mistakes, kept it really clean, did well under the safety car, didn't get overtaken between safety cars, even though that was a relatively short amount of time. She raced really, really well and showed everyone why she deserves to be leading this championship. And I was just, yeah, so excited for her as sort of, she's in her second year, in her last year. She's one of the veterans now, and she really showed people why she deserves to have a very long and good future in motorsports, in my opinion. I have I have Dorian Goat written down just because I just thought it was an excellent race from her. I was so excited as a Dorian fan. I was like, leading the championship, let's go. And she got a 24-point lead, as I said, due to race one. And she also continued to score really, really well on the weekend. Leah Block ended in P5, an unhindered by penalties P5, and actually, so she ended P5 in the race, but actually, because Emma was disqualified, she ended in P4. That is the Leah Block we have all been waiting for this season. She's obviously had some incidents, some her fault, some not, but this is what we've been waiting for from her. We knew she had the talent, we just needed the execution, and it was there, and it was glorious. I'm such a Leah Block fan, especially after watching F1 The Academy, the Netflix series. It showed so much about her life, and honestly, she gained a new fan out of me. I mean, I was a fan before, but I'm an extra fan now because just seeing what she's doing, how she's come to this series with sort of the limited single-seater background, I think it's incredible. And yeah, I'm following along because I'm so excited. I think she has so much potential, and having that P4, that P5 on the road and P4 finish, incredible. Love to see it from her. And honestly, I can't wait to see her on the podium. We need to see Leah Block on the podium before this series ends. I can't even begin to imagine the scenes of when she makes it onto the podium. It's going to be crazy. And I'm so excited for it. And I believe that she can do it. And she will. I have so much faith. Since this isn't my official Montreal recap, I don't want to get into too much of like where the standings are afterwards because we can talk about that in a later video. But for now, I did just want to talk a little bit about who showed up at the podium because maybe everyone who watches F1 Academy, they all know what I'm about to say. But Jonathan Wheatley was there for Emma's first podium, which obviously she was disqualified later, but I thought that was so cool to have the team principal there supporting her, even if she hadn't won the race at that point. Toto Wolff still not showing up to Dorian's race win once again. I think I pointed that out in China, and I'm going to point it out here again. I think it's disappointing. She is so good. I know he's a busy guy, but come on. Like, Jonathan Wheatley made it for Emma's P3. Like, come on. Anyway. Lewis Hamilton was there. That's what you thought I was going to say. Lewis Hamilton was there. And, you know, the Netflix series showed Dorian and Lewis having a really fantastic relationship when Lewis was still in Mercedes. And even though he, you know, is now in Ferrari, showing up in Ferrari gear, it was so cool to see him there celebrating Dorian's win, showing support for the series. I want to put up some photos just of his Instagram story. He posted a photo of the track of them racing, and he posted a thing supporting the Netflix series saying that people should go watch it. And I just thought that was so cool. I genuinely think he does so much for diversity in motorsport. And not to mention, he is well aware of the kind of effect his presence and his support can have, and the kind of influence that he can have just by being present. So for him to show up to her win like that, it was so special. And I thought that it showed just what a good role model he is to be supporting the girls like that and publicly supporting the series. He's under no obligation to do so, but he knows that when he's visible and when he's supporting something like that visibly, that it gets a lot more eyes and a lot more attention. And I think that that was really, really special of him to do. And just personally, on a human note, it was so lovely to know that even though he's changed teams, he's still supporting Dorian and supporting her wins like he does. Because I think, as I said, the Netflix series really portrayed them as having, you know, a close, special relationship. Her sort of new in her single-seater career and trying to learn and grow and having all this raw, natural talent, and him sort of in the later stages of a very, very fantastic career, mentoring her a bit and sort of being that part of that support for her at Mercedes. And it was really nice to see that that kind of continued on, even though he's moved teams. That is finally all for this video. I will be back with a Montreal everything video. Of course I will. I love to talk about F1 Academy, and I will keep doing it until the cows come home. But until then, that's it. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.